and welcome back to our Bond series on vodka martinis, or, in this case, the Bond vodkas, and product placement in Bond movies. Today on PCZ TV.
PCZ TV.
Had a great comment on the last video from Jake, and it stimulated me to pivot this video and focus on Bond marketing. Now, I spent my career in marketing, so if this video is a bit long, well, mea culpa. The Inside the Cask website shares a great infographic from Hollywood branded of Bond and all the associated brands over the years. It's much too large and densely populated to replicate here, so let's just use the Bond franchise vodkas to examine the practice of product placement and see how well each brand leverages their Bond opportunity. Now, product placement is an interesting business. First of all, shocker, not all product placement is paid. Sometimes the use of a particular brand is to generate realistic scenes or provide a shorthand for the character. For instance, Fleming used brands extensively in his novels, especially liquor, to generate imagery and create a feeling and background for the characters. For a review of the literary booze brands, please see these videos. And of course, I just stumbled across this website, which examines all the brands mentioned specifically by Fleming in his novels. It is pretty cool. Check it out if you get a chance. Anywho, let's jump back in time into the history of product placement. It appears that the first paid product placement in novels was with Jules Verne. The CBC states that when Verne wrote Around the World in 80 Days back in 1873, shipping firms competed financially to be mentioned in his book. And, in an ironic twist of Bond fate, Pierce Brosnan would star in the cinematic version of this book.
Coincidence? I think not!
And speaking of the cinematic side, the early days of product placement in movies was a way for the production company to save money from buying all those props. It is interesting to note that the very first movie to win a Best Picture Oscar featured prominent product placement. Wings in 1927 showed a scene where a chocolate bar was eaten, followed by a long, lingering close-up of the Hershey logo. But was this paid? Hollywood accounting is murky indeed. Most sources say it was quid pro quo, props for placement, but hard to believe it wasn't paid since it was a candy bar. Now again, according to the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company, 20th Century Fox became the first major Hollywood studio to offer product placement in return for cash in 1982, and the fees ranged from $10,000 to $50,000 depending on the film. And then the floodgates were opened. And no movie series really does it better than the Bond franchise. They've evolved to make it a foundation of their production and use it to subsidize production costs, co-promote the movie, and maximize profit. In an interview with the BBC, Daniel Craig claimed, "The simple fact is, we couldn't make the movie without product placement." So let's try to get a benchmark for Bond. How much does product placement in a Bond movie cost? Well, it depends. First, it's a tightly kept secret. How much money these brands are paying is rarely confirmed, but astronomical sums are estimated in the press. For instance, Heineken allegedly paid $45 million to have its green bottles appear in multiple scenes in Skyfall. That's roughly a third of the production budget for Skyfall, which was estimated at $150 million. In addition, Heineken ran creative units featuring the product and Bond in theaters, online, and in broadcast, including a 2-minute version that aired during the 2020 Super Bowl, where the average cost for a 30-second Super Bowl spot is something on the order of $7 million. Heineken also released special edition product featuring Bond. That's a lot of total investment. The Journal of Management and Marketing Research estimates that total spending on product placements in entertainment reached about $7.5 billion last year. That's a lot of dough. I'll chat more about the economics and rationale on product placement after we drink our vodkas. We'll use vodkas as a proxy to see the evolution of Bond product placement, as booze plays a huge part in both the movies and the books. And we'll use Heineken as a benchmark to see the angle each brand takes to leverage their investment. Note, I've omitted Grey Goose, as the interwebs indicate they didn't pay for placement, and as such, they didn't do any marketing. Before we begin, for a complete breakdown of all the vodka martinis of James Bond, watch this video. But now, turning to the Bond vodka brands. In the novels, Fleming chose the brand Wolfschmidt. Now, the funny thing is, M derided vodka as rotgut, but later in his club, he's specifically calling out Wolfschmidt from Riga and highlighting pre-war. Wolfschmidt, well, the Riga area is in Latvia, and that makes sense given that Wolfschmidt can trace its origins back to Latvia. Then the Netherlands, before venturing over to America in 1847. So Fleming mentioned pre-war, but they moved to the US in 1847, so what war is he referring to, the US Civil War? But what about the product itself? Wolfschmidt is sort of the brunt of cheap vodka jokes. No less key authority than Anthony Bourdain took shots at the brand, both in his book and his TV shows. Fleming, through James Bond, has probably been the best global salesman of vodka ever, but I'm pretty sure Fleming is not an expert at vodka. He knows his vodka about as well as he knows his firearms, which is not really. And for a complete breakdown of Fleming's firearms, see these videos to talk about the guns in his books. And on a tangent,
Stay on target.
Wolfschmidt vodka is now owned by Jim Beam brands. And look, who was selling Jim Beam? And Jim Beam itself was in a Bond movie. More Bond coincidences.
Coincidence? I think not!
Anywho, this leads us to the cinematic Bond, where the challenge is trying to determine when product placement became paid. And newsflash, I can't find that information anywhere. If you know, do let me know. But let's start at the OG, Smirnoff, and fasten your seatbelts, kids. This is a crazy ride. The Smirnoff brand began with a vodka distillery founded in Moscow by Pyotr Smirnoff in 1864. When the Tsar nationalized the Russian vodka industry in 1904, his son Vladimir Smirnoff was forced to sell his factory and the brand. During the October Revolution of 1917, the Smirnoff family fled the country. And in 1920, Vladimir established a factory in Turkey, and 4 years later, he moved to unpronounceable Polish city name, then in the Second Polish Republic. But after World War II, the border moved, and that city ended up in the Ukraine. But meanwhile, in 1933, Vladimir sold Rudolf Kunet, sorry, I forgot his name wrong, the rights to Smirnoff vodka production and sales in North America. And Rudolf established the first North American Smirnoff distillery in Connecticut at the end of Prohibition. But by 1938, Rudolf could not afford the sales licenses and sold the company to John Martin. In 1982, the RJR Reynolds Tobacco Company acquired the firm, and then its successor, RGR Nabisco, sold the division to Grand Metropolitan in 1987, who then merged with Guinness to form Diageo in 1997. Wow, that's a pretty wild ownership journey for an IP. So let's now turn to Smirnoff product placement. In the movie, Bond drinks a variety of Smirnoff, red, blue, and black. Well, what's with the various colors? Well, the short form is red is the standard version, blue is stronger, and black is made in copper pots. Well, Smirnoff was there at the start of Bond, and at irregular points throughout the series, but how do they market it? Clearly, Dr. No has a lot of Smirnoff prominently displayed in the movie in multiple scenes. Note how the label is biased towards the camera. But I wasn't able to locate any ancillary marketing during this era, which is weird, as their ads in this era did feature movie stars. In fact, the only tie-in I could locate was this super rare insert in a UK magazine. And now the next few Bond films, well, it's interesting because the Smirnoff bottles are there and they can be identified more by shape than label because the labels are either positioned away from the camera or removed. So I'm guessing Smirnoff wasn't an official marketing partner during this era? So when did they come back in a recognizable way? Well, it wasn't until Octopussy that we saw Smirnoff again, but again, without bold placement. So was it paid or not? And looking at it from a marketing perspective, if it was paid, then their ads seem like business as usual with no Bond tie-in. Ironically, they did have the Bourne series author Robert Ludlum in an ad that same year. And this perplexes me. As a marketer, why would you not want to leverage the Bond image in your advertising? And it's not like this is some crazy idea. I mean, Rolex has previously leveraged Bond as far back as Thunderball. Nor is Roger adverse to marketing. After all, here he is shilling Toyotas right during the same time period as an ersatz Bond.
Have a good day.
Next, there's another movie gap for Smirnoff, and the next time we see the brand is in 1995's GoldenEye. And now we start to see some tie-ins with a ticket promotion, some on-bottle advertising, and even a spy-themed long-form video. Well, they must have been happy with the investment, as Smirnoff is in the next few Bond movies. Tomorrow Never Dies in 1997. The World Is Not Enough in 1999. But they drop out after this. But even in this period, looking at it, their marketing is very uneven. Tomorrow Never Dies continues the heavier co-promotion of the film. And we see some typical product placement that is, well, suboptimal from a major sponsor's perspective. And the same sort of lackluster product placement continued in The World Is Not Enough. But strangely, I couldn't find any Smirnoff advertising of The World Is Not Enough. So, why? Well, the website James Bond Dossier indicated that at this time Smirnoff said its target demographic was in the 21 through 29 age group, while James Bond fans were men aged 25 to 45. So maybe based on their previous experience with the other two movies, they decided to dial back on Bond. And eventually, as a brand, they decided to skip the next movie. Bye! But boy, oh boy, did they come back in a big way in Casino Royale.
And we're back!
Smirnoff allegedly spent more than $100 million on media and promotion support for the movie, with Wiki estimating the movie budget between $100 and $150 million. Smirnoff essentially covered the production cost. Well, little wonder that they had some key product placements in the movie. And we see the usual print tie-ins, evolving into some branded product, and they upped the ante even more with Quantum of Solace, with exclusive branded product, including some Bond pre-roll. So these last two executions are at least equal. Robust marketing ecosystem that Heineken leveraged. And then Smirnoff drops out again.
Bye.
Okay. It doesn't seem to be tied into any of the buy sells that we saw timing-wise with the IP, so it must be based on the marketing analytics and key performance indicators that the brand was hoping for? Well, as you'd guess, based on history, Smirnoff changes direction again and comes back into the franchise with No Time to Die and prominent product placement, the usual print, some digital, but I didn't see the amount of co-branded marketing that I did on Casino Royale. Perhaps this was a smaller investment to achieve better ROI? So let's transition to the next Bond brand, Stolichnaya. And brace yourself. If you thought it was a lot of buy-sells with Smirnoff, there's a whole nother layer of drama with Stoli. Stolichnaya has its origins in the Moscow State Wine Warehouse No. 1, but there's confusion about the actual establishment date of Stolichnaya. The trademark was registered in 1938, but the earliest confirmed production date is 1948. What we do know for sure was that in 1953, Stolichnaya was introduced at the International Trade Show in Bern and received a gold medal. In 1972, the PepsiCo company struck a barter agreement with the government of the Soviet Union, in which PepsiCo was granted exportation and Western marketing rights to Stoli in exchange for importation and Soviet marketing of Pepsi. That's some trade. This exchange led to Pepsi being the first American consumer product to be produced, marketed, and sold in the Soviet Union. Before the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Stolichnaya was made in the Ukraine. Okay, now it gets messy. During the breakup of the Soviet Union, steps were taken to transform the state-owned producer into a privately held company called SPI, which is owned by a Russian oligarch and is now based in Luxembourg and distills the beverage in Latvia. Or is the story different?
Or is it?
Because another company, FKP, disputes that the brand was privatized. They claim they still own the trademark, and they still distill Stoli, and it's distilled in Russia, which has led to a bunch of trademark disputes, which is still continuing. The bottom line, folks, Stoli in the West is owned by a Russian oligarch, and in Russia, by the Russian government. Either way, it's bad. Don't drink this stuff. Product placement-wise, the first Bond appearance is in You Only Live Twice. So let's take a peek at their marketing support. Oh, I couldn't find anything in this period at all. So let's move on to the next appearance, which was in A View to a Kill. Well, product placement doesn't get much bolder than this. But marketing-wise, I'm not seeing anything they did to leverage the Bond product placement at all. Next time we see it, we're up to Dalton's Bond. And here again, he consumed Stoli on screen, both in The Living Daylights and in A License to Kill. But again, I don't see where the brand took advantage of the opportunity to promote their involvement with the Bond franchise. They just went for pure traditional product placement. What a waste of capitalist dollars. Cinematically, this is the last we've seen of this brand, and good riddance, comrade. Next up, Absolut. Absolut was established in 1879 by Lars Olsen Smith. Sorry, I've been conditioned to talk that way by The Muppet Show. How rude. The vodka was made in another city whose name I can't pronounce. And in 1917, the Swedish government monopolized the country's alcohol industry, and this brand was then sold nationwide under the name I can't pronounce either. In 1979, it was exported globally under the shortened brand name of Absolut. And Absolut was purchased in 2008 by Pernod Ricard. Nice clean history compared to the previous two brands, but what about the Bond connection? Well, Absolut has a one-off appearance in the quasi-official Never say never again. But it does have prominent product placement. But I couldn't find any period marketing tie-ins. The ads I found online I don't think are correct, as the gun barrel sequence, as well as the stylized 007 logo, were not allowed to be used for this non-Eon production. So I'm gonna say nope. And guessing that all the Absolut involvement was traditional product placement, it's gonna sound like a broken record. I find it interesting from a marketing perspective that they're not leveraging that connection with their ancillary marketing support. Interesting so far, isn't it? Well, next up is Finlandia. Again, apologies. It was founded in 1888 by Dr. Wilhelm Juslin in the small Finnish village of Unpronounceable. I mean, can't they just use American names? Crikey, they're killing me. Anyway, in 1920, after the passage of the Alcohol Prohibition Act in Finland, the distillery was bought by the Finnish state. In 1971, Alco, the state-owned alcoholic beverage company, began exports. In 2000, the US-based Brown-Forman Corporation acquired 45% of Finlandia. And 2 years later, they acquired an additional 35% until finally taking over complete ownership in 2004. What confuses me is that Wikipedia says Finlandia is now known by the Coca-Cola Hellenic Bottling Company, but I can find no information on this corporate ping pong. If you know who actually owns this IP, do let me know. So let's see what the Finlandia marketing team came up, shall we? Placement-wise, pretty weak. And okay, to be fair, this whole movie is pretty weak. But I'm finding some print, digital, and some merch, but pretty underwhelming for an undisclosed Bond product placement cost. Finally, we're going to move to the last vodka brand and the best vodka brand, Belvedere. It's a Polish rye vodka named after the Polish presidential palace in Warsaw, whose illustration appears on its bottles. The distillery that produces Belvedere was constructed in 1910. Productions of this particular variety of vodka began in 1993 at the facility located at an unpronounceable Polish city's name. Okay, I'm sorry, I hereby surrender my Polish card. In 2002, 40% was acquired by the luxury goods group LVMH, and in 2005, the stake was raised to 100%. Wow, lots of mergers and acquisitions in the booze business. Anyway, as we all know, Poland is the home of vodka, and they take vodka very seriously. For instance, in order for Belvedere to be labeled a super premium Polska vodka, the vodka must be produced using specific Polish grains or potatoes and Polish water. And the official labeling of Polish vodka also requires that no artificial additives be added to the vodkas. So, as such, Belvedere uses a variety of Dankowski rye, harvested from one of the 7 nearby farms. So, let's see how their marketing team did, shall we? They approached it as a whole ecosystem, similar to Heineken, starting with a unique bottle, a branded martini shaker, dedicated print, dedicated digital. And so at this point, all of the assets seem very consistent with Bond and a premium brand.
But wait! There's more!
But then we have this video, which confuses me to no end. This is not consistent with the tone and positioning of their previous assets. So what was the creative brief for this? I don't understand. I'm not seeing how this is aspirational or aligned with established Bond imagery. As we'll see later, folks, people look for Bond connectivity, not so much the personal proclivities of the actor or director. Now, in the background, you're seeing a few clips, but feel free to see the whole video in my Martini video. And I think you'll agree with me that this is a big and probably expensive miss. I'd love to see this creative brief. So that concludes all the various vodka brands and how they leveraged James Bond. Conclusions to our study? Well, overall, unevenness comes to mind. Either simple product placement, or they're all in and somewhere in between. They seem to vary a lot. We've seen brands come and leave and come back again, or dip their toe in and leave. I mean, you have to look no further than Smirnoff to see them start with a bang, went to a whimper, left, came back and forth, various engagement levels. The only conclusion I can take is that it's difficult for a vodka brand to determine ROI. Well, let's contrast this versus BMW. Now, according to the CBC, BMW paid $3 million to make the BMW Z3 Bond's car of choice in 1995's GoldenEye. Within the first month of the film's release, 9,000 orders came in, totaling $240 million in advance sales alone. And BMW sold twice the number of Z3s it had hoped for. That's serious ROI. So is the lift from Bond product placement category dependent? But I would think premium vodka would be one of those products with serious sales increases because the Bond franchise is unique. Bond is sophisticated. He spends more time drinking and seducing ladies than any other action hero. He can sell lifestyle to an older, more affluent, and more aspirational audience than, say, Spider-Man. In an interview with the BBC, Daryl Cullis, the director of one of Britain's leading product placement agencies, Seesaw Media, said, "It's a cliche that Bond is someone who every man wants to be, but it's true. Bond's suit means more than Daniel Craig's suit." Collins also goes on to state that the appetite to drive what Bond is driving, or drink what he's drinking, or wear what he's wearing is incredible. And this totally aligns with my assessment of the Belvedere video. It wasn't Bond. It was a Daniel Craig and Takatiki, whatever his name is, vanity piece, which sort of foreshadowed the dumpster fire that was No Time to Die. I think that David Saritsky and his great YouTube channel, The Bond Experience, which you should definitely follow, confirms this. He's not trying to emulate Daniel Craig. He's looking to replicate James Bond. And we know from a sartorial perspective that clothing and peripherals of Bond produce serious sales bumps for the brands. But maybe not so much for vodka. I honestly don't know. Here's the part of the equation which is difficult to quantify for a marketer. And that's the longevity that Bond product placement produces. People watch a Bond movie for decades. Bond is a global property. If you break it down into all the different countries that the company would be advertising in, and then add in the longevity, it's not as if they're paying for a one-off ad. They're paying to become known as a premium brand in the long term. You could argue it's more about shifting perceptions than shifting products. And that maybe is a hard sell to the C-suite. So let me ask you, do you drink a particular brand of vodka because of Bond? If so, which one? And why isn't it Belvedere? And do you have any ideas of why premium vodka, something that should be so synonymous with Bond and his vodka martini, is the category with the weirdest product placement and support range history? If you've been watching this far, I thank you.
Bye.